Welcome back to Better Life Broadcasting. Again today we have Dr. Neil Nedley with us. Dr. Nedley is the president of Weimar Institute in California, and he's also the author of books like Proof Positive, Depression: A Way Out, and we're just delighted to have you with us again today.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Charles.
So today I wanted to talk about emotional intelligence, or EQ. Emotional intelligence is EI. Why do we call it EQ?
Well, because of IQ. You know, it's your ability, IQ is your ability to learn, retain, and apply knowledge. And EQ has to do with your emotional abilities. So that's why it's kind of called that. But EI is another term for it.
Okay. So emotional intelligence, I've actually met some people that probably lack some of that. I've probably lacked some of that at some times. So emotional intelligence, how is that important relative to IQ?
Well, it's actually more important than IQ in a lot of ways because your motivation comes from the emotional intelligence side of things. And you can have high IQ, but if you're not motivated, you're not going to do well. And you're not going to be able to have the success and fulfillment that you would have otherwise. But precisely what it is, it's your ability to know and understand your emotions and the emotions of others and respond to those emotions in a healthy way. And there's, quite a bit involved in that. We have to not only identify the emotions that we are feeling, but understand why we're feeling that way. And also be able to understand our thoughts involved in why we're feeling that way. Because it's not just being cut off in traffic why we got angry. It's actually our thoughts about why we got cut off in traffic that make us angry. And so, it's our thoughts that actually cause our emotions and behavior. And so an emotional intelligent person is going to be one that actually analyzes their thoughts and corrects their thoughts if they are out of line. In other words, if they're either not accurate or they're not rational or they're not helpful. And of course, emotional intelligence is not just knowing and understanding our emotions, but being able to manage those emotions. And that's a crucial part of emotional intelligence. Low emotional intelligence people are simply managed by their emotions, moment by moment, day by day. But you can still have powerful emotions, but if you're managing those emotions, that's part of emotional intelligence. And then it gets into our relationship with others, our ability to recognize emotions in others and to be able to manage relationships with others. That's all emotional intelligence things.
Emotions are, in many ways, just the icing on the cake. What we're eating mostly is the cake, but boy, that icing sure changes the whole picture of life, and yet it's kind of the insignificant part. Is this why Solomon said, keep the heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life?
Yes, absolutely. Keeping the heart. And of course, the heart in the Old Testament was really talking about, yes, exactly. Yeah, which are actually coming from the mind. And so that's really talking about managing our thoughts as well, because it's our thoughts that cause our feelings. Mm-hmm. Some people get upset about that and they say, that means that you're telling me I'm responsible for my own feelings. But actually, thank God it is our thoughts that cause our emotions, because we can change our thoughts.
It gives us more control.
Exactly. And once we understand that, once we begin to understand the principles of emotional intelligence and improve it, that means we can actually change our own feelings and in healthy, rational ways that will be helpful to us.
So I'm someone who's read my Bible through probably over 40 times.
Wow.
And in doing that, I find a lot of hard statements, direct. When I say hard, I don't mean bad. I mean just, it's like gravity pulls you down. That's a hard, fast statement. It's a reality step. Mm-hmm. And the Bible has a lot of those kind of statements, like a man who has friends must show himself friendly. So I'm a person who doesn't have very many friends, and I just feel really sorry for myself because no one really likes me. And probably everyone's really out to get me because no one really likes me. So if I embrace that thought,
exactly,
then that's going to change my emotions. And When I say hi to you and you walk past me and don't even acknowledge me, I'm sure it's because you don't like me.
Right.
And then I really feel bad. Is this what you're describing?
Exactly, yeah. And of course, those are irrational thoughts. I think the average viewer is going to recognize it as such. And so that's why we have to check our thoughts. And of course, it's a process. This is why we've written a book about it and a workbook on optimizing your brain, how to enhance your emotional intelligence. And we have actually people develop flashcards to be able to recognize their distortions and then turn the flashcard around to have the true and accurate thoughts so that we can start repetitively thinking true and accurate thoughts, because that will produce some powerful positive effects.
So I was told of a story of a lady who went out to the edge of a parking lot to get in her car. She's going to get in her car, a van door opens and she's grabbed and pulled in. She's terribly abused. And of course, you don't want to witness to terrible abuse, so they tied her hands and feet and chucked her over a bridge about 100 foot up. So she's not going to live. But by God's providence, she hits the water just right, and even though she's tied up, she makes it to shore, and they get caught and arrested. Good story, it ends well. Better part of the story was what I was told she said while she was being abused. They may have my body, but they don't have my soul. So she could actually live from that experience, not believing a lie about that bad experience. God doesn't love me. I must be not a good person for God to allow this. And so I have a phrase that I've used in this kind of case: the lie you believe about a bad event is worse than the bad event. So what she went through was terrible. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But if you started to say, well, I must be trash, I must not be worth anything, I must not be valuable, that lie stays with you and colors everything you do.
Exactly.
Whereas saying, no, there's a God who still loves me.
Yeah.
And that was a bad experience, and in heaven it won't be like that. You know, choosing a different line of thoughts can change your emotional intelligence, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does that do for your self-control?
It enhances self-control. And, you know, lack of self-control is one of the largest problems of humanity today. It's actually one of the major causes of death and discord and imprisonment and relationship problems, and the list goes on and on. But we can't have self-control unless we're able to manage our emotions first. And I would say maybe you should apply to become a counselor in our program. I like what you just went through in regards to that case. But this is, of course, what we're dealing with in our program in regards to the mental filters that experiences in life have given us. And we just can't state that because those experiences are there, we're going to have these mental filters. No, we can actually change the way we think about things. And when we do, and it becomes rational and true and helpful, it will powerfully change our emotions, and it will powerfully change our effectiveness from then forward. So
I'm reading in my Bible while I'm thinking, I'm not loved, nobody cares about me, and then I read, I have loved you with an everlasting love.
Exactly.
I came from heaven to die for you.
Yeah.
You can't be more valuable than the God of all creation dying for you. I mean, how do you top that in value, in love, in desire? So then that means that the other thought must be from another source. It must be something that's going to tear me down and not build me back up.
Yes, it's very important for us to understand the worth, the infinite value of any human being. And of course, the reason why that is because the brain is of infinite value. Our brain has wonderful abilities to be able to change, and change for the better. So any person, no matter how bad their brain seems to be, that brain has capacity to undergo some dramatic positive changes. And one of the things that's very important is for us to understand the infinite value of a soul, but at the same time, to recognize that infinity is not greater than infinity. In other words, that doesn't mean that you're of more value than someone else.
Right.
Because that's when arrogance and pride starts to develop, and narcissism can lead to all sorts of adverse emotional experiences not only for the narcissist, which it will be bad for the narcissist, but to those around them. And of course, this whole inflated sense of self-esteem that culture tries to drive us to is actually going to lead us to feelings of worthlessness as that pride gets wounded. And that's when we can start thinking these other thoughts. And so instead, it's important for us to recognize that every soul is of infinite value. But that doesn't mean that I'm better or more worthwhile than you or anybody else.
Right, right. I remember standing at in line for an ice cream. It was a hot day, and it was eating between meals, which isn't really healthy. Eating ice cream isn't really healthy. Eating ice cream in between meals isn't really healthy. And I know that, but you know, it's a hot day and I deserve a treat. Or do I deserve a treat? So I walk in the store and I end up standing behind two ladies who are obese. And I'm not trying to attack obese ladies, but you couldn't help notice because they were wearing tights. And I'm not sure why they do that. But the one lady said to the other lady, you know, we really shouldn't be doing this. The other lady said, yeah, I know, but we're going to. And I'm standing behind them looking at the girth and thinking, you know, I don't want to look like that. And so I turned around and left and didn't get any ice cream.
Oh, wow.
So self-control.
So they helped you in managing your own emotions.
And my own emotions and the lie that I was believing I deserve that. So what do we do to motivate a faulty EQ?
Well, that's a great question, and one that is very important. And of course, I think you realized in that whole process, and I've heard so many people say this, particularly after they lose weight, but nothing tastes as good as being thin feels. And so, you know, we need to recognize that just trying to tantalize our taste for that short term is going to adversely affect our feelings in a lot of different ways. And so if we look towards long-term goals, we're going to feel better even short-term because we'll be, you know, it's so much more fulfilling to recognize that we've done something that's healthy that we're going to benefit from.
Right. So you said earlier that many times the pharmaceuticals that we go to or the self-medication we go to, whether it's beer or alcohol or meth or whatever, smoking, a beer, I got to have a beer, you know, and it's self-medicating. That lifestyle of doing that to stop our emotional pain, because I was abused as a child, you know, I'm not worth anything, whatever the reasons are that we do, I want to fit in. There's got to be an alternative in a God-created world that I wouldn't have to go to those things. What's my alternatives?
Oh, there's lots of alternatives, you know, and this is and I'm glad you asked that question, because when we are in the cycle of addictions, and it's hard for people in the cycle of addictions to recognize this, but you know, first they do it to get high, but eventually their dopamine levels get lower and lower as a result of this process, and now they're just doing it to get up to neutral. So the vast majority of their days are spent in very low dopamine levels, you know, deep distressing sense of deprivation. And they think they need this to, like you mentioned, to self-medicate, to feel neutral.
I need a coffee, I need a beer, I need whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But once they actually make the decision, I'm not going to do this, and instead I'm going to get on some healthy approaches that are going to help change my brain for the better, they're actually going to be living their life in dopamine levels that are far above neutral, sometimes very high above neutral, sometimes not so high, but they'll still live the vast majority of their life that way. And there's over 1,000 things that will help bring it up. A simple walk, going on a hike to a waterfall, you know, listening to good music that is moving. Actually, you know, even reading the Bible or the book of Psalms or Daniel or just a chapter. They'll actually get a dopamine high as they're learning new things.
As someone who's read through my Bible over 40 times, I can say the one time that I'm truly truly at peace and without any guilt is when I've spent time in the Word and I've heard God speak to my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And so these are things that people in a cycle of addictions can't understand. They're thinking, you know, that doesn't do anything for me. I just went on a walk and it does nothing for me. And, you know, I just had a conversation with my wife, but it's not doing anything for me per se. But it's those simple social situations, the nice a talk with, you know, a good friend. Those type of things will produce nice dopamine highs. And there's over, like I say, over 1,000. We could actually add it up. There's over 1 million things that can healthfully produce those nice dopamine levels. But there's far less than 1 million. There's actually less than 1,000 things that are false ways of altering that dopamine level. But humanity focuses in on those 1,000 things, of which marijuana is one of them, of which narcotics, of which cocaine, all of those things. And so we get so narrow focused on these things and we ignore the many things in life that can enhance our dopamine healthfully and naturally. And so that's why it requires sometimes, you know, an entire program and approach with professionals so that they can see what's going on in the brain to be able to change that around and get them working on those plus 1,000 things that are going to actually enhance their brain. And pretty soon they won't even miss their addiction, and they'll be praising God that they're free from it and they don't have to go through those cycles of those dopamine lows and neutral and all of those, you know, rapid changes that take place in an individual that's in those addictions.
I saw someone put a video together called Supersize Me. I'm sure you've probably seen it or heard of it. But the guy made a vow that if he went to McDonald's, he was going to eat 3 meals a day at McDonald's. And if they ever asked, do you want to supersize that? He'd say yes. And so he would go in and order whatever they had on their menu. And he said the first few times he had this dopamine surge that you talked about, where you, wow, that really tasted good. That really felt good. That really was nice. And it wasn't long before he didn't feel good anymore. And when they would say, supersize me, and he would continue to eat it, he would go out and throw up right then and there.
Yeah.
So I call that the law of diminishing returns.
Exactly.
And you have to put in more and more to get less and less. And he asked the doctor before he did this, is this going to bother me? If I do this for a month or 40 days, whatever it was, is this going to really hurt me if I eat every meal at McDonald's? And he said, no, not much. Before it was over, the doctors were saying, you got to stop.
Yeah.
It's killing you. This is killing you.
Yeah.
And so I think about all the people who do that, whether it's a Coca-Cola or soda, you know, I got to have my Barq's root beer because it's got a good jolt of caffeine, or my Mountain Dew. This is actually depriving us of that dopamine that can make us feel good.
Exactly. Yeah, it's depriving us of the tranquil pleasures of life that can be had, you know, moment by moment every day. Right. In people that are addiction free and really totally free.
So I think that before we end this particular broadcast, I think we should talk about where a low dopamine or poor uptake of dopamine, or when you're negative, and I've heard this, that when you're negative and I keep saying a negative thing and it makes me more depressed, and I say another negative thing and it makes me more depressed, I say another, that it not only lowers the production of dopamine, but lowers the ability to uptake the dopamine even if I had a shot of it. And so it becomes a cascading cycle. Yeah, it becomes a cascading cycle, which often leads people to contemplate getting out of the pain, out of the sadness, out of the depression. Suicide becomes an option.
Yeah, morbid thoughts. They're at an all-time high in our society. 1.4 million people last year seriously attempted to end their life.
In America?
In America, yeah. And it is really, you know, when you get to that stage, it is important that you get help. Don't just put up with that. You know, unfortunately, our typical psychiatric centers, when people get admitted, they teach them on safety plans, alternatives. When we deal with it comprehensively, like our program does, within 10 days, those thoughts are gone. They're not even there. They're not even contemplating it even once in a while because we've taken care of the underlying reasons that lead to that point. And so the world doesn't think that they can necessarily ever get rid of the thoughts. That's why they're just doing safety plans and then trying to medicate and trying to numb the brain and trying to plug the vacuum cleaners and those sorts of things. And this is not a good, healthy, long-term solution that's going to transform the brain for a better way.
It's not emotionally intelligent.
Exactly. Nor is it generally intelligent. It's not necessarily a high IQ thing to do. And so we want to lay the axe at the root of the tree. We want to find precisely the underlying issues, and let's get to those core issues. And let's be able to solve them, whether it's core issues of adverse childhood experiences and the mental filters that come about. How can we change the brain and practice thinking rational thoughts so that those things don't come up anymore? What about the biochemistry? Maybe we do have low dopamine in part due to a metal metabolism disorder and some nutritional things. Let's get to the core of that so we know how to fix that. Maybe we have circadian rhythm issues on top of it. Maybe we have some frontal lobe issues and entertainment issues that are problems. So as we get to those core issues, we can actually get rid of suicidal thoughts once and for all, as long as we stay on a good, healthy program that's going to keep our emotional intelligence enhanced.
I'm going to shift gears because you're talking like a psychologist, and you're not a psychologist. You're an internist. How did you come to know all this about the brain when you're an internist?
Well, first of all, 1 in 3 people that an internist sees has major depression. And when I realized that, I realized I needed to become an expert in depression and anxiety. But also one of my field is gastroenterology. And if we were to scrape the nerves off of the bowel at the time of surgery, they would weigh 4 times as much as the entire spinal cord. So there's quite a brain-GI connection. And so to treat the gut well, I needed to learn a lot more about the brain. And then as I started to treat the brain issues behind GI issues, then people with depression and anxiety heard about what was happening with their friends getting better. And so I started getting flooded with depression and anxiety, and I realized I needed to become an expert in that. And it turns out, as much as I enjoy all the physical health issues, my wife gave me perspective. She says, as good a doctor as you are, there are probably 1 to 2 percentile doctors that can do just as good as you can GI-wise and physical-wise, but there's nobody doing what you're doing mental health-wise. And so if you want to make a difference that no one else is doing, you need to go into this mental health field because lives are being totally transformed. And I took her advice, and so that's our primary thing that we do now, is actually the mental health and helping people improve their emotional intelligence, optimize their brain, and eradicate mental illness for good.
So I didn't realize it, but it just makes perfect sense that you have such a good EQ is because of your wife. Who gave you good direction.
I do have a wonderful
steered you in the right
wife.
direction.
Yes, sometimes we need counsel. Even people with good brains can be counseled in the right direction.
You definitely have a gift for analyzing and diagnosing and thinking through so many of these issues, and so many people are desperately in need of that. So you got 30 seconds, look into the camera, talk to that person who's struggling right now. They got depression, they've got poor EQ. What would you say to give them hope?
Well, your brain can be fixed. There is no brain that is beyond being able to be fixed. There is hope for you. And I would encourage you to get the tools necessary to find out exactly what's going on. And let us help you if at all possible. We have community programs, home-based programs, and we also have our own residential programs that can turn you into a person that is happy, fulfilled, filled with joy, and also filled with motivation to help others change their lives positively.
Dr. Nedley, we so much appreciate you being with us, and we appreciate you joining us today. If you would like more information about Weimar Institute, about Depression, A Way Out, or any of the resources that Dr. Nedley has talked about or has prepared, then I encourage you to contact us here at Better Life Broadcasting or go online to Weimar Institute there in California. And God bless you as you have greater EQ.
Better Life Broadcasting is a viewer-supported Christian media ministry that offers streaming programming via apps on various devices. Please visit blbn.org to support Better Life or to get more information. And don't forget to like and subscribe.